The sound of a crystal glass shattering against a marble floor is loud, but the silence that followed it was deafening. Inside the Obsidian, New York's most exclusive restaurant, 50 of the city's wealthiest people stopped breathing. Julian Thorne, a man worth $6 billion and known for destroying companies before breakfast, had just screamed in the face of a 23-year-old waitress. Everyone expected her to cry. Everyone expected her to run. Instead, Sonny Vance leaned over the table, looked the billionaire dead in the eye, and whispered 7 words that would change the entire trajectory of Wall Street. "Shout at me again, and this ends." What Julian did next didn't just shock the room, it terrified them. You are not going to believe how this night ends. The rain in Manhattan that Tuesday was relentless, hammering against the dark floor, toe-siling windows of the Obsidian. Inside, the air smelled of truffle oil, aged mahogany, and fear. Sonny Vance adjusted the collar of her black uniform. Her feet were throbbing. It was her second double shift in a row, and the rent on her tiny apartment in Queens was due in 3 days. She was exhausted, but her face was a mask of perfect professional indifference. "Table 1 needs a refill on the Pinot, and be careful." The maître, a nervous man named Charles, hissed as he passed her. "Mr. Thorne is in a mood." Sonny didn't need the warning. Everyone in the city knew who Julian Thorne was. At 32, he was the CEO of Thorne Capital, a private equity firm that acquired struggling businesses, stripped them for parts, and sold them for massive profits. He was handsome in a terrifying, sharp-edged way. Dark hair, gray eyes that looked like storm clouds, and a jawline that could cut glass. But tonight he looked like a man on the edge of a violent explosion. He was sitting with 2 other men. One was his lawyer, a sweaty man named Peter. The other was Marcus Sterling, Julian's biggest rival. Sterling was older, heavier, and had a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sonny approached the table with the wine bottle. "I'm telling you, Julian, the valuation is off," Sterling was saying, leaning back in his leather chair. "You're buying a sinking ship. The logistics division of Kincaid Shipping is riddled with debt." Julian slammed his hand on the table. The silverware jumped. "Don't lecture me on debt, Marcus. I know the books better than you do. You're trying to lowball me because you want the assets for yourself. I'm trying to save you from a billion-dollar mistake." Sterling smirked. Sonny moved silently to Julian's right side to pour the wine. She had done this 1,000 times. The paw was perfect. But just as she started to twist the bottle to catch the drop, Julian threw his arm out in a gesture of frustration. His elbow connected hard with Sonny's wrist. The bottle didn't fall, but the red wine sloshed violently, splashing out of the glass and onto the cuff of Julian's pristine, custom-tailored white shirt. The reaction was instantaneous. Julian shot up from his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "For God's sake!" he roared. The sound echoed through the high ceilings of the restaurant. Sonny stepped back, clutching the bottle against her chest. "Sir, look at this!" Julian shouted, his face flushing with anger. He wasn't just mad about the shirt. He was venting the pressure of a failing negotiation, and Sonny was the convenient target. "Do you have any idea how much this suit costs? Are you incompetent or just stupid?" The entire restaurant went silent. The forks hovered halfway to mouths. Conversations died. At table 4, a senator looked away nervously. At table 7, a tech mogul watched with wide eyes. Charles the Metro came rushing over, his face pale. "Mr. Thorne, I am so terribly sorry. She's new. She didn't mean." "I don't care if she's new," Julian barked, turning his gray eyes on Sonny. He towered over her. "I'm in the middle of a deal that could change the industry, and I have to deal with a clumsy waitress ruining a $5,000 suit. Get out of my sight. In fact, get out of this building." Sterling let out a low, mocking chuckle. "Rough night, Julian. Can't even control the help." That laugh did it. Something inside Sonny snapped. It wasn't the insult. It wasn't even the yelling. It was the arrogance. It was the assumption that because he had billions and she had an apron, she wasn't a human being. She thought of her father, a man who worked himself to death, broken by men exactly like Julian Thorne. Sunny didn't retreat. She didn't apologize again. She stepped forward. She set the wine bottle down on the table with a definitive thud. The noise was soft, but in the silence, it sounded like a gavel. Sunani looked up. She locked eyes with Julian Thorne. She didn't blink. She didn't tremble. "I didn't spill the wine, Mr. Thorne," she said. Her voice was low, steady, and crystal clear. "You hit my arm because you lack impulse control." Charles gasped. "Sunny, leave immediately." Sunny ignored him. She kept her eyes on Julian. "You are negotiating a deal for Concade shipping. You are stressed because Mr. Sterling here is baiting you, and you are falling for it. But you do not take that out on me." Julian looked stunned. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He had never been spoken to like this. Not by his board members, not by his enemies, and certainly not by a waitress. Sunani leaned in closer, dropping her voice to a lethal whisper that only the three men at the table could hear. "Shout at me again and this ends." Julian blinked. "Excuse me, this dinner," Sunny said. "I walk away. Charles calls security. You make a scene. And Mr. Sterling here goes back to his partners and tells them that Julian Thorne is so emotionally unstable, he screamed at a waitress over a drop of wine. How do you think that impacts your stock price tomorrow morning?" The silence stretched for 5 agonizing seconds. Sterling's smirk vanished. He looked at Julian, waiting to see if the billionaire would explode. Julian stared at Sunny. He looked at her cheap uniform, her pulled-back hair, her tired eyes that held a fire he hadn't seen in years. He saw something there. Not fear, intelligence. Slowly, the red color faded from Julian's face. He looked down at his stained cuff, then back at Sunny. A strange, crooked smile touched the corner of his lips. "Sit down," Julian said. Sunny frowned. "Sir," Julian gestured to the empty chair next to him, the 4th chair at the table meant for a partner who hadn't shown up. "I said sit down." Julian, Clear's throat, repeated, his voice calm, now controlled. He looked at Charles. "Bring her a glass and a menu." "Mr. Thorne," Charles stammered. "Do it," Julian commanded. Then he looked back at Sunny. "You think I'm losing this negotiation. I know you are," Sunny said, remaining standing. "Prove it," Julian challenged. "Sit down." Clear's throat. "If you can explain why I'm losing to Sterling, I'll give you $10,000 right now to cover your rent and that suit. If you can't, you're fired." Sunny hesitated. $10,000. That was 6 months of rent. That was freedom. She looked at Sterling, who looked nervous now. She looked at Julian. Sunny pulled out the chair and sat down. "Deal," she said. The atmosphere at Table 1 shifted instantly. It went from a public spectacle to a high-stakes war room. Charles, trembling, placed a crystal glass in front of Sunny and filled it with the same vintage wine she had been serving. He retreated quickly, looking like he expected the building to explode. "This is ridiculous, Julian." Marcus Sterling huffed, straightening his tie. "You're going to let a server look at confidential merger documents. I'm leaving." "Sit down, Marcus." Julian said, his eyes not leaving Sunny. "You were just complaining that the deal was boring. Now it's interesting." He slid a thick stack of papers across the tablecloth towards Sunny. "Concade Shipping Logistics Division. Marcus says the debt is toxic. I say the infrastructure is worth the risk. Who is right?" Sunny didn't touch the wine. She reached for the documents. Her hands, rough from washing dishes, turned the crisp, expensive paper. What Julian and Sterling didn't know, what nobody at the Obsidian knew, was that Sunani Vance wasn't always a waitress. 5 years ago, she had been a prodigy. She had been on a full scholarship to Wharton studying forensic accounting. She had a gift for patterns, for seeing the numbers that people tried to hide. But then her father got sick. The medical bills piled up. The insurance denied the claims. She dropped out to work 3 jobs to pay for his treatment until the day he died. She never went back. She couldn't afford the tuition, and the grief had buried her ambition. Until tonight. Sunny scanned the balance sheets. Her eyes darted across the columns. Assets, liabilities, depreciation schedules. The table was silent for 2 minutes. Well, Sterling sneered. Does the waitress need a calculator? Sunny looked up, ignoring Sterling completely. She turned to Julian. He's lying to you, she said calmly. Julian's eyebrows shot up. About the debt. No, the debt is real. It's actually worse than the summary says, Sunny said, flipping to page 42. But that's a decoy. A decoy. Julian leaned in. Look here. Sunny pointed to a footnote in the inventory section. He's valuing the shipping containers and the fleet at current market value. But Coincidental holds a legacy contract with the port of Rotterdam mentioned in this addendum here. That contract expires in 3 months. She tapped the paper. Without that contract, Sanani continued, her voice gaining strength. The fleet can't dock in Europe without paying a tariff that's 40% higher than the industry standard. The valuation of this company drops by half the moment you sign. Sterling isn't trying to save you from a mistake. He's trying to sell you a bomb before it goes off. Julian froze. He snatched the paper from her, reading the fine print she had pointed out. His eyes narrowed. He did the mental math. He looked up at Marcus Sterling. Sterling was pale. He reached for his water glass, his hand shaking slightly. Is this true? Marcus Julian asked. His voice was terrifyingly quiet. It's a standard clause, Julian. We were going to renegotiate the rotted damn deal, Sterling stammered. You were dumping this on me, Julian said, realizing the magnitude of the trap. You were going to let me buy Concade, let the contract expire, and then watch my stock tank so you could buy my company for pennies on the dollar. Sterling stood up abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. This is insanity. Taking financial advice from a girl who clears tables. This girl just saved me $300 million. Julian said coldly. Get out, Marcus. The deal is dead, and tomorrow I'm shorting your stock. Sterling glared at Sunny with pure hatred. You have no idea what you've just done, you little rat. You've made enemies you can't afford. He stormed out of the restaurant. Julian watched him go, then turned slowly back to Sunny. The anger was gone from his face, replaced by a look of intense curiosity. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a checkbook, and uncapped a fountain pen. He wrote quickly, ripped out the check, and slid it across the table. Sunny looked at it. It wasn't for $10,000. It was for $50,000. I keep my word, Julian said. That's for the advice and the shirt. Sunny stared at the check. It was more money than she had made in 2 years. It could pay off all her debts. It could change her life. She looked at Julian. I can't take this. Why not? You earned it because I didn't do it for the money, Sunny said, pushing the check back. I did it because I hate bullies. And Sterling is a bully. She stood up, smoothing her apron. I have to get back to work, Mr. Thorne. My shift isn't over. She turned to walk away. Wait, Julian said. Sunny stopped. Julian stood up. He was tall, 6'2", and for the first time that night he didn't look like a tyrant. He looked like a man who had finally found something interesting in a boring world. You're wasted here, he said. You have a mind for forensic accounting. Why are you serving pastor? Oh, life happens, Sunny said shortly. Come work for me, Julian said. Sunny laughed, a dry, humorless sound. As what, your personal mood manager? No thanks. As a junior analyst, Julian said, Thorne Capital. We start at $120,000 a year plus bonuses. You start Monday. Sunny's heart hammered against her ribs. It was the dream she had given up on. But she looked at Julian, the man who had screamed at her 10 minutes ago. I don't work for people who scream at their staff, she said. I won't scream at you. Julian said, a smirk returning. I have a feeling you're the only person in New York who would scream back. He placed his business card on the table next to the rejected check. Monday morning, 8:00 a.m. Don't be late. Julian Thorne threw a stack of cash on the table to cover the bill, grabbed his coat, and walked out into the rain, leaving Sonny standing there, the business card gleaming under the chandelier light. Sonny didn't sleep that weekend. She spent Saturday and Sunday staring at the business card, Thorne Capital. It was the most aggressive cutthroat firm in the city. Working there was like voluntarily walking into a lion's cage. But then she looked at her apartment, the water stain on the ceiling, the empty fridge, the collection notices for her late father's medical bills. She had to do it. On Monday morning, Sonny Vance stepped out of the subway at Wall Street. She wasn't wearing a uniform. She was wearing her only good suit, a navy blue blazer she had bought for interviews years ago, and a pair of heels she had polished until they shone. The Thorne Capitol building was a glass monolith piercing the sky. When she arrived at the reception on the 40th floor, the receptionist, a woman with perfectly coiffed blonde hair, looked down her nose at her. "Can I help you? I'm here to see Mr. Thorne. I'm the new analyst." The receptionist raised an eyebrow. "Name, Sonny Vance." The receptionist typed into her computer. She paused. Her expression shifted from disdain to confusion. "Mr. Thorne put you on his personal calendar. Go right in." The double doors at the end of the hall. Sonny walked down the corridor. It was a hive of activity. Men and women in expensive suits shouted into phones, stared at 6-screen setups, and moved with frantic energy. She reached the double doors. She knocked. Enter. She pushed the doors open. Julian's office was larger than her entire apartment. It had a panoramic view of the Hudson River. Julian was standing by the window on the phone. "I don't care what the SEC says. Fix it," he said. Then hung up. He turned to Sonny. He looked different in the daylight, less shadowy, but just as intense. He scanned her from head to toe. "You showed up," he said. "I need the money," Sonny said honestly. "Honesty good. That's rare here." Julian walked to his massive oak desk. "Here is your first assignment." He dropped a thick file on the desk. "This is the merger file for Sterling Industries." "The man you met at dinner, Marcus Sterling." Sonny stepped forward. "I thought that deal was dead." "The Concade deal is dead," Julian said, his eyes glinting. "But you humiliated Sterling in front of me. He's angry. He's reckless. When men like Sterling get angry, they make mistakes. I want to acquire his company." Hostile takeover. Sonny felt a chill. "You want me to help you destroy the man I insulted? I want you to find the skeletons in his closet," Julian corrected. "You found the Rotterdam clause in 2 minutes. I want to know what else he's hiding. You have 48 hours. And if I don't find anything, then you go back to the Obsidian and refill water glasses. It was a test." A brutal one. Sonny took the file. "Where is my desk?" Julian pointed to a small glass cubicle right outside his office door. "Right there where I can see you." For the next 2 days, Sonny lived in that cubicle. She drank terrible office coffee and ate vending machine crackers. She dove into the financials of Sterling Industries. At first, everything looked perfect. Sterling was careful. But Sonny remembered the pattern from the restaurant. He hid things in the footnotes and the boring details nobody checked. Late Tuesday night, the office was empty except for the cleaning crew and Julian, who was still in his office. Sonny's eyes were burning. Clear's throat. She was about to give up when she saw it. A recurring payment to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. It was small, insignificant, but the company name, Clear's throat, Lerner Corp., matched a vendor listed in an environmental impact report from 3 years ago. She cross-referenced the dates. Every time Lerner Corp. Was paid, there was a dip in Sterling's waste disposal costs. She pulled the satellite imaging data for one of Sterling's chemical plants in New Jersey. She gasped. Sonny grabbed the papers and ran into Julian's office without knocking. Julian was asleep on his leather couch, his arm over his eyes. He sat up instantly as she burst in. "What?" he asked, voice rough with sleep. "I found it," Sonny said, breathless. She slammed the file onto the coffee table. Sterling isn't just cooking the books, he's poisoning the water. Julian rubbed his face and looked at the data she presented. Explain. He's bypassing waste disposal regulations by paying off a shell company to dump chemical runoff into protected wetlands. It's illegal dumping on a massive scale. If this gets out, his stock doesn't just drop. He goes to federal prison. Julian looked at the papers. He looked at Sonny. The air in the room charged with electricity. You're sure 100%. Julian stood up. He walked over to her. He was close. Too close. Sonny could smell the coffee and expensive cedar wood. You just handed me a loaded gun, Sonny. What are you going to do with it, she asked. I'm going to kill him. Clear's throat, Julian whispered metaphorically. He reached out, and for a second, Sonny thought he was going to touch her face. His hand hovered near her shoulder. Go home, Sonny. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, we go to war. Sonny nodded and turned to leave. Sonny. She stopped at the door. You're not a waitress anymore, Julian said softly. Sonny smiled a real smile this time. Good night, boss. She left the building feeling invincible, but she didn't know that she was being watched. Across the street in a black sedan with tinted windows, Marcus Sterling watched Sonny Vance walk out of the Thorne Capitol building. He held a phone to his ear. That's her, Sterling said, his voice dripping with venom. The girl from the restaurant. She's working for him now. She's the one digging. A voice on the other end crackled. What do you want us to do? Sterling watched Sonny disappear into the subway station. I want her scared, Sterling said. I want her to wish she had never learned to read. Break her. And if that doesn't work, remove her. The intimidation started subtly. First, it was silent phone calls in the middle of the night. Then Sonny noticed a gray sedan following her on her morning commute. But Sonny Vance had spent years dodging debt collectors and navigating bad neighborhoods. She wasn't easily rattled. She kept her head down and focused on building the case against Marcus Sterling. 3 days after finding the environmental report, Sonny returned to her apartment in Queens at 11:00 p.m. She was exhausted. The lights in the hallway were busted again. She unlocked her door and froze. Her apartment had been tossed. The sofa cushions were slashed. A few books were torn apart. The drawers were emptied onto the floor. And on the wall, spray-painted in jagged red letters, was a message. Stick to serving tables. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't a robbery, nothing of value. Her laptop, her small TV, was taken. This was a message. Suddenly, she heard the heavy crunch of boots on glass behind her. Sonny spun around. 2 men in dark jackets were standing in her doorway, blocking the exit. They wore ski masks. You're a smart girl. The taller one grunted, stepping into the small room. He held a collapsible baton. Mr. Sterling thinks you need a lesson in privacy. Sonny backed up until her legs hit the overturned coffee table. She scanned the room for a weapon, a lamp, a shard of glass. Anything. Get out, she warned, her voice trembling but loud. I've already sent the files to the cloud. Hurting me won't stop it. Maybe not, the man sneered, raising the baton, but it'll make you think twice about sending them to the press. He swung. Sonny ducked the bat horn, smashing the lamp beside her. She screamed, scrambling back, grabbing a heavy ceramic vase. Just as the man raised his arm for a second strike, a deafening crack filled the hallway outside. The door frame splintered. The 2 men froze. Standing in the hallway, flanked by 3 massive bodyguards who looked like they were carved out of granite, was Julian Thorne. Clear's throat. Julian didn't look like a CEO. He looked like a predator. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. His sleeves were rolled up and his face was a mask of cold, unadulterated rage. I suggest you drop that, Julian said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. The intruder hesitated. Who the hell are... Julian nodded to his security team. The violence was precise and over in 10 seconds. Julian's head of security, a man named Voronov, dismantled the attackers with professional efficiency. They were on the ground, zip-tied and groaning before Sonny could even exhale. Julian stepped over the debris and walked straight to Sonny. He didn't look at the attackers. He didn't look at the spray paint. He looked only at her. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, scanning her face. I'm fine," Sonny breathed, the adrenaline dumping out of her system, leaving her shaking. "How did you know? I've had a security detail on you since Tuesday," Julian admitted. "They alerted me the moment these men entered the building. I was 5 minutes away." Sonny stared at him. "You had me followed. I had you protected," Julian corrected sternly. "There is a difference, and clearly it was necessary." He looked around the destroyed apartment. He saw the poverty she lived in, the slashed furniture, the threat on the wall. His jaw tightened until a muscle feather in his cheek. "Pack a bag," Julian ordered. "What pack a bag, Sonny? You aren't staying here. Not tonight. Not ever again. I can't just," Sonny, Julian said. And for the first time, he used her name with a softness that stopped her protests. He reached out and gently brushed a piece of drywall dust from her shoulder. "You went after a shark for me. Did you think I'd let you get eaten? You're under my protection now." 10 minutes later, Sonny was in the back of Julian's armored Maybach, speeding toward Manhattan. They didn't go to a hotel. They went to the penthouse of the 432 Park Avenue tower, Julian's home. It was a palace in the sky overlooking the entire city. It was stark, modern, and lonely. "Guest room is down the hall on the right," Julian said as they entered. He walked to the liquor cabinet and poured 2 stiff drinks. He handed one to her. Sonny took the glass. Her hands were still shaking. "Thank you." Julian leaned against the marble island, watching her. "Sterling made a mistake tonight." "He tried to scare me," Sonny said. "No." Julian shook his head, his eyes dark. He made it personal. "Business is business, Sonny. I can forgive corporate espionage. I can forgive insults. But nobody touches my people. My people." The words hung in the air. Sonny looked at the billionaire. He was willing to start a war for her. "The annual winter solstice gala is tomorrow night," Julian said suddenly. "Sterling will be there. He's receiving a Man of the Year award for philanthropy." Sonny scoffed. "Philanthropy. The man is poisoning New Jersey, exactly." Julian smiled a cruel, sharp smile. "I wasn't going to go. But now I think we should make an appearance." He looked at Sonny. "I want you there with me." "Julian, I'm a waitress. I don't belong at a gala." "You are the smartest analyst in my firm," Julian said firmly. "And tomorrow we aren't just going to arrest Sterling. We are going to destroy him in front of everyone he tries to impress." "Go to sleep, Sonny. Tomorrow we go hunting." The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a sea of diamonds, tuxedos, and fake smiles. It was the biggest night of the New York social calendar. Marcus Sterling stood at the center of the room, holding a glass of champagne, basking in the adoration of the city's elite. He felt invincible. His men had reported that the girl had been handled. Then the double doors swung open. The room went quiet. The murmur of conversation died out like a flame deprived of oxygen. Clear's throat. Julian Thorne walked in. He wore a black tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, but nobody was looking at Julian. They were looking at the woman on his arm. Sonny Vance wore a floor-length gown of deep blood-red silk. It was backless, elegant, and daring. Her hair was swept up, revealing her neck, and she wore a diamond necklace that Julian had pulled from his personal safe, a piece worth more than Sterling's entire house. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a queen. Sterling dropped his champagne glass. It shattered, mirroring the sound from the restaurant a week ago. Julian guided Sonny through the crowd. The crowd parted for them like the Red Sea. They walked straight up to Sterling. "Marcus," Julian said pleasantly, "congrats on the award." Sterling's face was pale, his eyes darting between Julian and Sonny. What are you doing here? Thorne, and with the help. Sonny stepped forward. She was terrified inside, but she channeled every ounce of anger she had felt when she saw her destroyed apartment. I'm not the help tonight, Marcus. Sanani said, her voice smooth. I'm the executioner. Sterling laughed nervously. I don't know what you're talking about. Learn a corp, Sonny whispered. Sterling flinched as if he'd been slapped. I know about the Cayman accounts. She continued, stepping closer, ignoring the hundreds of people watching them. I know about the wetlands. I know you paid off the inspectors in 2023. You have no proof. Sterling hissed, sweat beading on his forehead. We have the bank transfers, Julian interjected, stepping up beside Sonny. And we have the dashcam footage from the men you sent to Sonny's apartment last night. They were very talkative once the police offered them a plea deal. Sterling looked around frantically. The room was staring. He realized too late that this wasn't a social visit. Security, Sterling shouted. Get these people out of here, I wouldn't do that. A deep voice beamed from the side. The crowd shifted. The district attorney of New York, a stern man named Robert Holloway, stepped out from behind a group of investors. He was holding a warrant. Marcus Sterling, the DA, said you are under arrest for environmental negligence, racketeering, and conspiracy to commit assault. The room erupted in gasps. Cameras flashed blindingly. Sterling panicked. He lunged at Sonny. You little witch! You ruined everything! Clear's throat. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her skin. Before he could pull her, Julian moved. It was a blur of motion. Julian grabbed Sterling's wrist, twisted it painfully, and shoved him backward. Sterling tripped over his own feet and fell onto the red carpet in a heap. Julian straightened his cuffs, looking down at his rival. I told you once, Julian said, his voice carrying through the silent ballroom. She's with me. Touch her again, and you won't make it to the police car. Two officers hauled Sterling to his feet and handcuffed him. As they dragged him away, screaming threats, the elite of New York turned their eyes to Julian and Sonny. It was a total victory. Later that night, on the balcony of the plaza, away from the cameras, Julian and Sonny looked out at the city. You did good, Julian said. We did good, Sanani corrected. She shivered in the cold air. Julian took off his tuxedo jacket and draped it over her shoulders. The warmth of it, the scent of him, overwhelmed her. So what happens now? Sonny asked. Sterling is gone. My job is done. Julian turned to her. He looked at her lips, then her eyes. The job isn't done, he said. I'm acquiring Sterling's company. It's going to be a mess to clean up. I need a CFO for the new acquisition. Sonny's eyes widened. CFO, Julian. I don't have a degree. I'm a dropout. I don't care about degrees, Julian said intensely. I care about talent and loyalty. You have both. Take the job, Sonny. Sonny looked at him. Is that the only reason you want me to stay? Julian stepped closer. The tension that had been building between them since the night at the restaurant finally snapped. No, he whispered. He leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was passionate. Desperate. The kiss of a man who had finally found his equal. Sonny kissed him back, wrapping her arms around his neck, the red silk of her dress rustling against his shirt. For a moment, everything was perfect, but they forgot one thing. Marcus Sterling was a man with connections, and even in handcuffs, he had made one last phone call. The next morning, the sun rose over Manhattan, painting the skyline in gold. But for Sonny Vans, the world was about to turn pitch black. The headlines were explosive. Billionaire arrested at gala. The city was buzzing with the news of Marcus Sterling's downfall. Sonny sat in her new office at Thorne Capital. It was a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling glass. She took a sip of her coffee. Looking out at the city, she felt she finally had a place in. For the first time in her life, she wasn't worrying about rent. She wasn't worrying about the cost of groceries. She felt safe. That safety lasted exactly 10 more minutes. At 9:15 a.m., the double doors of the trading floor slammed open with a violence that made half the analysts jump from their seats. FBI, hands off your keyboards. Nobody move. A dozen agents in windbreakers swarmed the floor. It was chaos. Phones were slammed down. Traders froze. Sunny stood up confused, her heart jumping into her throat. She moved toward her glass door, but before she could open it, 3 agents were there. "Sonny Vance!" the lead agent barked. He was a broad-shouldered man with eyes like flint. "Yes," Sonny stammered, stepping back. "You are under arrest for corporate espionage, wire fraud, and insider trading." Clear's throat. The words hit her like physical blows. "What? No, that's insane." "You have the wrong person." "Turn around and place your hands behind your back," the agent commanded, pulling out a pair of heavy steel handcuffs. Julian, Sonny screamed, looking toward the CEO's office. "Julian, help." Julian Thorne burst out of his office. He looked impeccable in a charcoal suit, but his face was filled with shock. He stormed toward the commotion. "What the hell is the meaning of this?" Julian demanded, his voice booming over the terrified silence of the trading floor. "You can't just storm into my firm. Back off." Mr. Thorne, the lead agent, warned, holding up a badge. "This is a federal warrant. We received an anonymous tip and a data dump at 4:00 a.m. Clear's throat. "It appears your star analyst here has been busy." The agent shoved a tablet into Julian's hands. "She's been shorting sterling stock using a burner account registered in the Cayman Islands under her deceased father's name." The agent explained loudly, ensuring the whole office could hear, using proprietary information she stole from your servers. "There's $2 million in that account, Mr. Thorne. Money she made by betting against the companies you were analyzing." Sonny felt the blood drain from her face. "That's a lie. I never opened any account. That's impossible." She looked at Julian, desperate for him to laugh, to call his lawyers to throw these men out. Julian stared at the tablet. He scrolled through the data. He saw the bank transfers. He saw Sonny's name. He saw the timestamps. It was a setup, a perfect airtight frame job. Marcus Sterling had a dead man's switch, a contingency plan to destroy Sonny if he ever went down. For a terrifying, agonizing 10 seconds, Julian didn't speak. He just stared at the screen. Then he looked up. His face was unrecognizable. The warmth, the passion, the partnership they had shared the night before. It was all gone, replaced by the cold, ruthless mask of the billionaire CEO. "Is this true?" Julian asked, his voice devoid of emotion.